Hey friends, welcome back. We're continuing to study how to pray with confidence according to apostolic prayers, or in other words, prayers according to the Bible. And today we're going to look at Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 through 12, where Paul specifically prays for the believers to be filled with a certain thing in order to walk a certain way. And these are prayers we can pray with confidence. What does he say? What are we to be filled with? Well, number one, with the knowledge of God's will. You know, very often the thing that inhibits us from discovering God's will is being too focused on our own will, our own desires, our own ambitions, our own projects. God the Father is eager to reveal His will, and that's why we can pray with confidence for the knowledge of His will, knowing that He wants to unveil that to us and include us in what He's doing in our generation. Knowing His will actually propels us into accomplishing His works. What are His works? He wants to heal. He wants to save. He wants to reconcile. And if you know that this is His will, you will be far more apt to co-labor with the Holy Spirit when He's doing His works in the earth today. And then he continues. He wants us to be filled with spiritual wisdom. Now, this far surpasses our human calculations, our human analysis of things, our human conclusions. Spiritual wisdom is able to see what is invisible, able to capture what is heavenly, and able to discern and impart that which is eternal. This is why we can pray with confidence to be filled with spiritual wisdom. It doesn't depend on our education or on our experiences. And then the next part says spiritual understanding. That's another thing we should be filled with. Your understanding affects your perception of people and of situations. It affects your judgment. It affects your ability to know how to act, how to respond in a given situation. So I've discovered that one of the greatest causes of broken relationships is in fact a lack of spiritual understanding. We can pray with confidence for spiritual understanding, knowing that this is part of God's will. Now, as we are filled with these things, it will affect how we walk. In other words, how we live our lives, how we interact with people. And this passage specifically says to be able to walk in a manner worthy of His name. My friends, that is my deepest desire. I hope that at the end of my life, people will say of me, she lived a life worthy of His name. Then, a way that is pleasing to God. You know, it is far more important to be pleasing to God than be pleasing to man. In fact, a man-pleasing spirit can really keep you from speaking the truth in love, addressing situations that need to be confronted, and even denouncing things that are harmful to the people that you love. Let's be people who are able to walk in a manner that is always pleasing to the Lord, far more than pleasing to men. And then walk in a way that is fruitful in every good work. That means we're not wasting our time on fruitless activities, fruitless endeavors, fruitless opportunities that appear good but that are not necessarily God's will. Also, as we are filled, we will be walking in a way that is increasing in the knowledge of God. What does that mean? You know, that is a language of true growth. When we are increasing in our knowledge of God, we're not content to remain where we are. We're not just staying in a position that is stagnant and status quo, but we are pursuing Him in order to know Him more intimately, more authentically, and more deeply. And then the final thing, when we are walking in a way that we are strengthened with all power, we realize that God is our strength in every situation. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10, that the grace of God was sufficient because the power of God is made perfect in weakness. And that's why he was able to say he didn't despise his weaknesses. To the contrary, he delighted in them. He didn't criticize his weaknesses. To the contrary, he was content with weakness because when he was weak, then he knew he would be strong with God's power. You know, the first time I prayed this particular passage, I had a vision of the Father's heart. I actually saw the Father looking at me in a way that was tender and full of appreciation, and I would even say proud of me. And I realized that when we begin to pray scripturally, we're actually praying the things that the Lord himself aspires to. His aspirations for us, his aspirations for the bride that he's preparing for his son. So when that sort of thing happens, my friends, you know you can be praying with confidence. On that note, let me encourage you to pray that way, and I'll see you next week.